All right, we've finished Chapter 7 overview, and let's get to a little bit of coding tonight, and in the Chapter 7 hands-on. So in Blackboard, in Module 7 at the bottom are your files, Chapter 7 class.zip, used for in-class hands-on. That's the title of that file. Download that, explode that, or extract that, whatever term you'd like to use. And those are the files that we'll be using. It should look something similar to the contents of this folder, which is the Chapter 7 class folder. It has two folders within, Float Overflow and Lighthouse. We'll be using the contents of both of those folders in the hands-on. Okay. All right, next thing I'll do is open up the Float Overflow file in my editor and in my browsers. So please do that. And in Notepad++, I'm just going to make some changes to some of the properties here, like word wrap, and then I'm going to zoom in a little bit because it's definitely a lot easier to see this than that small text. I will also kind of minimize a few of these applications. It should look something like that when you open that file up. So let's minimize that. I'm going to minimize everything that I can, so this way I can display both the editor and the browser side by side, so we have a better idea of what I can code, and then just quickly flip over from one to the other. So, okay. All right, so your code looks something like this for that file in the Float Overflow folder. It's titled CSS Float is the title of that page. And you can see the contents of it. It has a inline or embedded style, of course. We use embedded only for class purposes, right? Just so it's easier without having to flip from files. We just have one file. Again, your case study and your project will be an external style sheet. Let's see, you have a heading 1, you have a div with a graphic in it, another paragraph, a heading 2 after it, and then a paragraph after that, and that's pretty much it. And it looks something like this in the browser, right? This is displaying this HTML page in normal flow. One element after the other, right? So this is normal flow. What we'd like to do after the next couple of little examples, we want our page to look something like this, okay? Using a little bit of CSS, okay? So we'll talk about float, we'll talk about clear, and then we'll talk about overflow. Those are the three things we're going to be looking at to get our page to look something like it does in this example. Okay, so let's get back to the way it looks now. Not so nice, right? All right, if you'd like to follow along, page 213 is the start of Chapter 7. As you know, we don't go expressly page by page, right? We try to accommodate the time we have, and I try to do all the exercises in a way, or the hands-on in a way that is most efficient. So please turn to page 216 so we can talk about float. Okay. All right, so the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to add some background color so we can actually see what objects and elements are changing as we apply CSS to them. So in the HTML file, after the closing curly brace of body, give me a couple of lines, and we're going to style the div. So go ahead and give me a div there, right? And so that's the selector. And all I want to do is color the background. So give me a background dash color. And we're going to give it a color of, let's see, hashtag F2, I'm sorry, F3, F2, and BF. Now, if you want to make it some other color, go right ahead. No problem there. So now I'm going to save this, flip-flop to my browser, refresh, and this is that div, right? So now I can really see where that div and what is contained within the div. It appears we have a graphic and we have some text within the div. Okay. All right, now that I have that set, let's style some of the other things. Okay. So after our div, we're going to style the H1, and that's now where we can kind of look at page 216. The first set of code that you see towards the bottom of the page, we're going to go ahead and put in that H1 in there. So go ahead and do that. I think some of these areas you've already used before, so it's nothing new. Background color, padding, and color is nothing new that we have not seen before. So I'll let you go ahead and just type it, and then we can go from there. So background color, what do they want there? It looks like they want it A8, C6, and 8.2. Oops, 8.2, there we go. And they also want a padding. Looks like 5 pixels all the way around of the box model. And then color for the text, and that's just black. So I'm just going to do the shortcut for black. So now I'll save that, flip-flop, and refresh, and there's my heading. Okay. So far, so good? All right, the next thing I'd like to do is style the paragraph. So let's throw in a P selector. And it looks like we're just changing the font family here. So font-family. And let's see, we're going to do a little bit of Arial. And then if they don't have Arial, then some sans serif. Sans serif. And that's all we're going to do for that one. Okay. All right, so all paragraphs is a sans serif, which is good. Should be. Headings, titles are usually serif, while actual content or body text is sans serif. It's very typical. It's just easier to see, easier to read. So, all right, now the next thing that's on page 216, it's in blue. Now we're going to make just one change here. They want you to create a ID called YLS. Okay, I think it's like yellow lady slipper. It's an abbreviation for that graphic. However, in my opinion, creating a ID for this doesn't make sense to me because I'd like to create rules that are reusable, right? So I can reuse this float that I'm about to create in other elements that I might have. So we're going to change it to a class, and then we're going to change the name of it as well. So we're going to create a class, and we're going to call it float graphic. So FLOAT and then GFX. Oops, not double O, 1 O. So what I've done is I've provided a name that describes what that class does and not what that class is, right? I've added a little bit there, the graphic. So I'm floating a graphic here, right? And that's really how we want to name our classes and our IDs, is about what they do or how they affect whatever element, right? So calling it a particular style, right, like red, bold, or something like that, doesn't make sense because we may actually change those properties in the rule, and that then throws off your naming conventions, all the way. So, all right, so we're going to call that one float graphics. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a float right. So float is the property and right is the value. And so I want to see what happens when I do this. So I'm going to save it, flip-flop, and refresh. Oop, hold on. Why doesn't it work? What's the problem here? What haven't we done? Thank you. We got to apply the class. So we created the class, and now we have to go down into the HTML and apply that class. All right, so let's do it within the image. So find the image element, and right after the G and IMG for image, we're going to put in class. And then what's the class name? We called it float GFX. Again, don't use the period. That's only for the CSS part. Okay. All right. Save it, flip-flop, refresh, and now, right, we have that graphic floating to the right. I want you to notice what's happened. This is still in normal flow, right? But notice how that background color has gotten smaller, right? It's now essentially the size of the paragraph and no longer, right, the size of the graphic and the paragraph put together, right? Because that was normal flow, one after the other. We've now said, well, you know what, let's just put that graphic to the side and let's wrap everything else around it. Notice my second level heading. Notice the paragraph below it. It's now wrapped around, right? Now, we do have some issues we have to figure out, right? And that is we have to extend that background color for the whole graphic. We're going to fix that. We also have a problem that our heading is sliding and wrapping up too far, right? I don't want it to be next to that graphic. It really should be its own separate line, right? So we're going to fix all those little things, and we'll do it one at a time. We'll use a clear to fix the H2, then we'll use an overflow to fix both the background color and the heading. So, okay. All right, so let's go back to our code, and let's continue to add more to that float graphic rule. All right, what else do we have? Oh, margin. All right, we're going to add a little bit of margin in there, and it looks like we don't have any for the top, none for the right. We got about 5 for the bottom and 5 for the left. Oops. My numlock is off. That's better. There we go. All right, so let's save that. Flip-flop to the browser. Let's see. Margin, float, looks okay. So it must have enough, and nothing's really changed for us. So let's see. Do this. It's not really going to change much for me. Okay. Margin. So we have 0, 0, 5. So just to make sure it works, I'm going to do 50 on the bottom there. And see what happens. Yeah, so notice what happened to that text, right? Because there's 50 pixels at the bottom. So maybe what might be best is changing this one to 50. We can maybe see a better result there, right? So now notice how the text shifted. We have 50 pixels to the left of that graphic, right? Okay, so it does work. It just wasn't enough to really make a difference in this case, right, with 5 and 5. Okay. The next one, we want to add a little bit of border, right? So add a nice little border around that graphic. So we'll do border, and then we'll do the style, the size, and the color all at one time using a nice little shortcut. All right. Solid, and then we're going to do the color. It looks like black. Or if you want to pick another color, go right ahead. No problem. All right. And so now we refresh, and we get a little border there. The graphics a bit dark already, so seeing or trying to see that color, that border is a little bit difficult, only because it's kind of small. It's only 1 pixel, and it's already as dark as the graphic itself. So if you want to change the color, go right ahead. No problem. Now notice what that adding of that border did to us, right? Notice how wildflowers is now on the next line, because there was enough space it took up to actually just push the word to the next line. Okay? So without those, that 1 pixel, right, nothing happened. So that's good. Any questions? All right, let's move on. We're going to do add a few more changes. So instead of the float being on the right, I want the float to be on the left. So replace the word right with the word left in the float. And now notice the settings we provided, right? We had left margin. Notice the space behind the graphic. You see the background back there, right? Because we gave it 5 pixels, so we're pushing it over a bit. So now we're actually seeing the background color of, right, the div that's covering the paragraph. And then we have 0 margin on the right-hand side, so the text is right up against it. So maybe let's make a few little changes. Instead of margin right all the way around, we're just going to give it right margin. So if you want to do margin dash right, that's an option, 10 pixels, or simply do it here. So 10 pixels, and then we're not going to give it any on the bottom or on the left. We're only going to give it 10 pixels on the right. So save that and refresh. And now you can see that it adjusts gives us a little bit more space, a nice little comfortable margin there, pushing, right, the object that's next to it away. That's what margin does. And now if we want to do something different with our border, let's add a 3-pixel border, make it a little bit bigger. It wants us to use ridge. And I don't know how much different we'll actually see with that. And then I guess the color is still black. So we're making it a larger one, and then you get to see a little bit different, right? You do see some change in that border, which actually doesn't look too bad. All right, so we still have these two essential issues that we're going to be dealing with and trying to correct. One is that my bee green when enjoying wildflowers heading is still by the graphic and really should be below the graphic. Because it's a new conversation that we're having. It's a separate heading, right? And it's not really part of that conversation with the graphic, right? Or the content with the graphic next to it. So one way we can solve this issue is using what's called a clear, okay? Page 218 and 219 talks about clearing a float. Clear is typically used to clear a float or terminate the float. What it means is simply is that we're going to get rid of the wrapping effect, okay? And so we want the next item, right, to be starting all over again, okay, on the left-hand side in this case, okay? So, and that's what we're going to do with what's called a float. So, to do that, we're going to create another rule. At the bottom of page 218, we have a clear left rule. So we're going to, and it's a class. So we're going to clear left. Okay. And it's a class, so we can use this as often as we want on the page, which is nice. And the property is called clear, and we're going to do clear left. So it's going to take whatever's next and clear it to the left-hand side. Okay. Great. Save that. And now we got to apply it. So let's go down to our HTML, and we're going to add a break after the paragraph. Okay. So that break will contain this class. So class equals, and then we called it clear left. So it should take the next element and clear it from wrapping here. So let's save it, flip-flop, and refresh. Now, just for kicks, I'm going to copy the content within the first paragraph, right, that has that graphic, and I'm simply going to paste it after it a couple of times. So I get more content. I want to see the result, right, of what we just did. So by having more content, we're seeing that the background extends, it wraps. Notice that there is, a little bit of distance between the second to the last line and the last line versus the graphic, right? So it's just a matter of the lines. But then it gives us this like awful looking space right below that. Why is that? What is that space? The break, right? It's pretty ugly. So we might have another alternative, okay, for that. So this way we're not getting that space like that. And if we look at, again, this is just one option that we have to clear that float. Another option that we have is on page 220 and 221. It's called overflow. So let's go back to our code, undo those additions, if you did, of all that content there. So we get back to where we were, so we can start from, right, a base, and then we can add that text later. Okay. So this is called overflow. It's the property called overflow. And the purpose of this property is to define how the content actually works, right, within an element. If it's too much, what do we get? We get a scroll bar maybe? Or, right, do we overflow it so this way it automatically goes below that graphic, so this way we don't have to use a break anymore, right? So that's what the overflow is for. Page 220, 221, right? So its purpose is to configure how the content should display if it's too large in an area that it's allocated within the div, okay? Now, our content isn't bigger than that element, that container. Not yet, that is. But either way, we're still going to use it, okay? All right, so what I want you to do is go up to the CSS, and I want you to comment out that clear left. How do we comment out CSS? There's two ways. We can comment out one line of CSS, or we can comment out multiple lines of CSS. Okay? So is it slash asterisk or asterisk slash? Okay, so let's do that here, asterisk slash. And now on the second line, this is a multi-line comment, right? We do our, what, slash asterisk? So is this it? Are you sure? Okay, good. So slash asterisk, and then we put in the star first, and then that, right? Now, just for FYI, how do I comment out one line? Let's say, for example, as a sample, how do I comment out just this line called margin? You got it. Double forward slashes comments out one line. I'm not going to do that here, but I wanted to make sure everybody was okay with that. All right, let's save that. Flip-flop to your browser. Refresh. Notice what happens, right? Because that break no longer is creating our clear. We simply have a break. That's all that's there. And it's not clearing anything, okay? All right, so next thing we'll do is we're going to code our overflow. So let's go back to our div. And that's where we want to code the overflow, because that's where our content actually resides, inside the div. We have a picture and text, right? All right, so after the background color, we're going to do overflow. That is the property. And we're going to say, you know what? I want you to figure out, right, what I should do or what the browser should do with the content that's in this element, okay? And then we're going to set a width to this div, and we're going to make it 100 pixels wide. So we're set. Oops, I'm sorry, 100%. So the entire. Come on, one more. There we go. Okay. So the width of this div is going to be 100%. 100% of what? The browser window or the container that it's in? Thank you. And the container that it's in is 500 pixels wide. Okay, great. So if that container ever gets larger, it's still going to be the full amount, right? Wherever that container is in. All right, so let's save that. Flip-flop, right? And so this provides automatic, right, overflow and provides us that extension of that background. Let's go back and get rid of that break. We no longer need this, right? Refresh and look what happens. It gets rid of that little extra because the break really shouldn't have been there in the first place. So without the overflow, the background slides up and only covers the paragraph. Using overflow in the div, it says, okay, hold on, I got a couple of items in this box. Let's make sure that it covers everything, right? Now, please add that extra content, right? So copy that paragraph, the content of it, and let's just add it, right? So it's just a larger paragraph, essentially. right? And so now you're getting that even space at the top and at the bottom of the container, where before you didn't have that, right? You had this uneven look. And now we can even further, if we wanted to, style, because there's some, what, padding there, right? Maybe there's some margin there for that paragraph. We can eliminate or increase, right, or decrease those pieces, and this way you can get that box exactly the way you want it. So if you have a situation that you're trying to create, right, and notice our B green is still on the new line, right, that you're trying to create that looks similar to this, overflow is the way you want to create it, right? Not all the time, but in this case, overflow is what you want. Clear is when you want to clear the float, which in some cases you may want to do. So really it's a matter of understanding the two properties, right? And then saying, okay, which one should I use here, and perhaps even testing, right? Which one is going to give me the effect that I'm looking for. Okay? So there's always one or more ways to skin that cat. Right? All right, page 220, 221, overflow. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is developing a two-column layout. Although the two-column layouts is discussed and talked about on 222 and the next couple of pages, right? We are going to, and there's a few other things being talked about, the navigation, let's see, unordered lists, right? Converting our lists to those. Even the pseudo classes, it's all discussed between 222 and 231. What we're going to do is we're going to put that all together, right, on page 232. So we're going to do a multi-column. We're going to talk about pseudo classes. We're going to convert our links to a UL all in one, right? Nice little hands-on practice. Okay? Now, the file that I want you to open is the one that's in the Lighthouse folder. So please open that. It is called index.html. It's in the Lighthouse folder. That file looks something like this right now. It has no styling, and it is displayed in normal flow. However it's coded in the HTML, it is displayed in the browser, one after the other. What we want it to look like when we're done is something like this. So that will become this, using CSS. We will not be changing the HTML. We will simply be coding CSS, right? So no reorganizing or redistributing of this HTML. We're simply saying we want this here, we want it to look like that, and this and so on. Also, notice my navigation. I got a rollover effect. No longer needed to use JavaScript. We use CSS to do this. And it's much better to use CSS because it will display in all the browsers. JavaScript sometimes, well, depending on whether you have JavaScript turned off or not, in a corporate environment, that sometimes is true, right? We don't have to worry about the JavaScript problem, right? We use CSS, good to go, okay? Notice, did you see the CSS sprite on the hover, right? So we're going to implement that as well, okay? Now, along with this, we're also going to include an image gallery, okay, which is part of this chapter as well. And that image gallery is going to allow us to use our hover to display graphics. So as I hover over them, they display on the right-hand side. We're going to include that on this page. Down at the bottom, underneath the panoramic view, we're going to include a nice little gallery. Does that sound good? So I'm hoping we can get through all of that tonight. Okay, great. So I just want to show you what we're going to be doing. All right, so let's get to our Lighthouse page, both in the browser and in our editor. Take a moment simply to review the HTML that's in your file. Okay. I'm going to kick this one notch a little bit smaller. little bit smaller so we can see more on a line. Oh, sorry, increasing. My bad. Is this still visible from the back there? Great. All right, so just again, take a moment, look at the elements that we have. We have a wrapper that's centering it most likely. We have We have a header, right? We have a nav, very similar to what our case study actually looks like, right? Same structure, Great. All right, page 232, 233 is where we are going to start this little exercise. And the first thing we need to do is add a line, because we are, this time, going to use an external style sheet. So please go to your head element, give me a new line after meta, and I want to write in our link element. It's on page 232. It's under number 1. So our link will provide us a link to our CSS that we will create. It's not created yet, but we will. All right, href. And the lighthouse, it's going to be called lighthouse.css when we finally create that. And of course, we need the rel and style sheet, right? Style sheet. There we go. Okay, so you can save that. Nothing really has changed because we don't have a CSS file, but we're going to create one now. So whenever tool you're using, please create a brand new file. And I want you to save it as lighthouse.css. If you're using Notepad++, down at the bottom of the Save As dialog box, you have a Save As type. Drop it down and look through the list until you find, it's probably about the middle of the way, cascading style sheet. That's what we want. And then I want it to be called lighthouse.css. So that's the file we're going to create. Lighthouse.css. So what we're going to try to do here is we're going to try to style the structure of our page. So we're going to look at starting from the top. We're going to style the body, then we're going to style the wrapper, then we're going to style the header, the nav, the main, the footer. Then we're going to go in and we're going to start to do a little bit more detail, right? Within each of the structural elements, we'll start to style those as we want, okay? So we'll start with the body. So under number 2, like the first bullet under number 2 is the body. So let's style that. At the top of your lighthouse.css, go ahead and add in your body selector. And let's code a background color and a font family. And that background color will be, so 00005D. No shortcut. Too bad. Oops. Need that pound sign. Yep. Need that hashtag. All right. Then we have font-family. And looks like we're doing what? Verdana, Arial, and sans serif. Okay. Oops, sorry, capital. Verdana, Arial, sans serif. Without the serifs. Okay. All right, save this. Flip-flop to your browser, refresh, and that's what you get, right? Yeah, it looks kind of crazy right now, but that's okay, right? Because we're doing it one piece at a time. So you might be asking yourself, should we put all our content on our page and then style it, or should I do it piece by piece? Put in a piece of code or content and then style it? What do you think? Thank you. You put in all your content, right, in that normal flow in the order that you want. You just stick it all in there. You create your structural elements. You put all the content in, all of it, just like we have. Then you go and style those piece by piece and put them in the place where they need to be. Okay? It'll be much, much more difficult to style each piece of information that you put in one at a time than it would be to, right, put in all the content, then style. We don't want to content style, content style, content style. Doesn't work that way, okay? You can do it if you want. Go right ahead. But this would be a much better choice. Okay. Great. All right, then after the body, we are going to style the wrapper. So let's create an ID called wrapper. Definitely like this color coding, right, when you're using a separate CSS file. It's really nice. And what are we going to do for the wrapper? It looks like we're going to do a little bit of margin. We're going to do a width. We're going to do a min width. Then we're going to do a background color and text color. Whew. Okay, we got a few things to code there. Nothing seems to be new at this point. We've seen all of these before. So margin and auto. And what else? We have width. 80%. So the width of this wrapper is going to take up 80% of the browser. Then we have min width. Don't go any smaller. So if somebody decides to be a smart aleck and resize the browser to see what happens, it won't go any smaller than 940, right? And then it looks like we're doing a little background color. Oops, there we go. And that background color is going to be, oh, all right, what is this? B3, C7, E6. Okay, whatever color that is. And then we're going to give it a little text color. So just color. And that's going to be, oh, we can do a shortcut here, 006. So that's nice. Okay. So the margin, we haven't seen this format before though, right? 0 and then auto. So what are we doing here? Repeat that again. From where? The first one, if we go clockwise, right? Top and bottom. No margin for top and bottom. Left and right should be auto. Awesome. Fantastic. All right, let's save it. Flip-flop, refresh. Bingo. All right. Let's keep on going. We're getting there. We're getting there. It's coming together. All right, the next one is the header. So now let's style the header. The next structural thing we're creating here. So header. And let's do that. And in the header, oh, we got a few here. We have background color and color, font size, padding, height, background repeat. Oh, and then we have an image, right? A background image. So I'm going to do some copy paste because we already have some of this code already. I'm just going to kind of, repurpose it here. So I'm going to do a background there and just put that there till I need it. So background color I can adjust already. We have 86. Let's get rid of that. So 86, 9DC7. And our text color is going to be 00005D. I think we used that one before. And then we have font size, which we haven't used yet, so at least on this page. We've used it before in our coding in the past. And that's going to be 150%, so 50% larger than the default font size. Okay. Then we have padding. Again, it looks like we're using a short form here with the 4 different values, I believe. And where is that? There it is. So 10 pixels for the top. We have 10 pixels for the 10 pixels for the right, 10 pixels for the bottom, and 155 pixels for the left. This is the header. All right, let's keep on going. And we have height. So let's do a little bit of height. And we're doing 130 pixels of height. Ooh. Oh, put it in the wrong spot. My bad. Exit out of that. Give me a new line and paste. There we go. Much better. And then we have background repeat. So background dash repeat. And we're going to copy that. Oh, we're going to copy that part. There we go. Background repeat. No repeat. And then we're going to do background dash image. Background image. Then what? Then let's see. URL. And then what are we doing? Lighthouse.jpg. JPG. Now I'm just going to quickly look to make sure I have that graphic. So I'm going to go to my folder, go into Lighthouse, and we're looking for lighthouse.jpg. Lighthouse Island, Lighthouse. We have Lighthouse logo. Oh, that's what the book has. I'm sorry. My bad. Lighthouse logo. Thank you. And we do have a Lighthouse logo. There it is. So that's what our Lighthouse logo looks like. Okay, so I think we're square there. So now I'm going to go ahead and save it, right? And refresh. And there's our Lighthouse logo. So now we see why we've given it padding, right, of 155 pixels so we can get over that graphic that's in the background, right? So why do we put the no repeat before the URL, before even having an image? So if we were to flip-flop those, we have a background image. The browser displays the image repeated, right? So I know it's really fast, but it could potentially display the graphic repeated, then no repeat it. But if we no repeat it first, it's already knows not to repeat the background graphic if it has one, right? So essentially we're trying to circumvent any goofy looking, right, rendering in the browser. Great. So far, so good. I want to see what it looks like. I haven't seen it yet. So let's save this. Refresh. Oh yeah, I did. Okay, so now we have that heading there. That's nice. All right, we move on to page 233. Let's take a look at the nav. So now we're going to modify the navigation a little bit. So nav, and let's see what it wants for the nav. Looks like, oh, we're going to float it. So we're going to take that whole navigation and float it to the right. Then we're going to give it a width, so I want to make the navigation area 150 pixels wide. We're going to change the font weight of whatever's inside the nav, and then the letter spacing as well. So we have a few things. So let's do that. So I'm going to just do right now, just to see what it looks like. Float right. So save, flip-flop. So that's what it looks like if we simply float the navigation to the right. Now, just for kicks, I'm going to do an outline so you can see what's happening. Look at this. It's outlining all the block level elements. Notice how the headings and the paragraphs are actually still there going across the whole entire page. And then there's my navigation, a small little box just for navigation. Everything else is wrapping underneath it, right? We don't want that to happen. We want to be able to have a nice little column for our navigation. And that's what we're going to try to do. Okay. All right, let's see how that works. All right, then we're going to go to, let's see, our code again. And we're going to give it, all right, width of 150. So width 150 pixels. Okay. And what else we got? Font weight and then letter space. Okay, so font dash weight and the weight of bold. And then letter dash spacing. Right. And we're going to do 0.1 EM. Okay. All right, so I'm going to save that, flip-flop, and so now, right, we're starting to manipulate that space there. Okay, we're not done yet. Okay, but we're starting to work. We're giving it a nice width, right? Because that's the space that I want. The other thing we have to do, right, of course, is make it a column so it looks like a column, right? We also have to get rid of those bullets, so we still have some work to do. Get rid of those underlines. Now, just for kicks, I'm going to play around with this letter spacing, and I'm going to give it like, like 9, just for kicks, and see what that changes. All right? Oh, not much there. So what if I did 1? Or maybe 5. Let's try that. And see what happens. Oh, let's see, letter spacing. Did I spell that wrong? Letter spacing. Letter spacing. Got that. Oh, that's why. I have a comma, not a semicolon. No wonder. Right? So now what happens, right? I really extend the letter spacing. So 5 pixels. That's crazy, right? Oh, going nuts here today. So like 2 pixels a piece, right? So now we went to that 0.1, I believe it was, right? Is that correct? 1? Yeah. So we're trying to make it, right, kind of close together. And so give you an idea. Okay? So that's really a nice way to just kind of test the property itself and see what it actually does is by, really exaggerating the value. So, okay, let's keep on going. Let's see here. I'm going to give myself a few lines here just so you can see it. You don't have to look at the bottom of the screen. All right, our next one is main. So that's our next item on the list. Our next structural element is main. So let's create a rule for that. And it looks like we're doing background color, text color, padding. Oh, we got an overflow. And then our display block, right? And so we'll make sure we understand why we're using display block there when main is already block, right? Supposedly. So, all right, I'm going to copy some background color, and here we go, from here, and I'll stick it right over here. Okay. Oops. And now our background color for main is going to be white. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, and then let's see here, and black. I guess is our text color. Okay, that's cool. And then we have padding. Looks like we're doing a little shortcut there, right? So padding is 10 and 10. All right, so 10 on the top and bottom, 10 on the 20 on the right and left. So 10 pixels, 20 pixels. Then we're doing overflow. Actually, before we do this, before I do overflow, I'll type it in and then I'll comment it out, just so we can see the difference, right, between having it overflow and not having it overflow, and see if there's any difference at this point that we can notice. Oh, come on. There we go. Auto. All right, and then I'll just type in the next one as well, and I'll comment them both out, and then we'll see what happens. And then display. All right, display. There we go. And block. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment these both out, all right, with single line comments. And so I'll save that. I'll refresh, right? And so that's essentially what we're looking at this point with, right, overflow auto and display block. Now, without having them, I'm going to open up IE, because IE will show us perhaps something, the reason why we have display block in there. So let me grab the URL, open up IE, and see currently what IE looks like. Right? So look at that. So currently, IE looks like this compared to this. The reason is that IE, this version of IE, does not recognize main. Okay? So we put display block so that if there is a browser that doesn't recognize the main element, right, then it knows what to do with it. Simply make it a block level, not inline level, because that's basically what's happening, right? It doesn't know how to interpret main, so it just leaves it alone. It just says, well, since I don't know what this is, I'm just gonna, do what I think I should do, which is usually incorrect. So, all right. So let's go back to that code, and now I'm gonna get rid of my overflow comment and my display comment. Refresh, bingo. Notice our overflow, right, gave us our nice little block there. That's very nice. And then in IE, yay, winner, winner, chicken dinner, right? All right. Like that. Okay. Let's go back to our code, and let's continue on. I like it when a plan comes together, huh? All right, page 233. We just did main, and the next bullet is for footer, for the footer. Okay. And we have font size, text align, padding, background color, and then we have a clear. In there. Okay. All right. So we're going to do footer. And we got font dash size, I think it is. And it looks like we're doing 70% of the default, right? 100%, so only 70%. So it's going to be smaller, okay, is what it's essentially going to do. We have a text dash align. We've seen this before, right? And we want to center that. And then we're going to go with a padding. And it appears the padding is going to be 10 pixels all around, so around the horn. And then we have a background color. Background dash color. And we're going with this 86.9 DC7. And then our last is our clear. Okay. Both. Now, I'm going to comment this out just so we can see the difference. We are not really going to see a lot of difference here, and I'll explain why. So I'm going to save this, flip-flop, refresh my browser, right? This is basically how it was before, okay? This is without the clear, right? Even if I go to my IE, right? I still get this footer that's there at the bottom, right? Now, if I go back and I uncomment out my clear both, right, and refresh, there is no change, okay? Now, the reason is that, essentially is that our main, right, already has our overflow, and our little piece on the right-hand side doesn't have enough content in it to surpass, right, the footer. So if we had enough content in that little navigation area, right, that was long enough that it would come past this part without the clear, both, that right-hand side would go next to this, and you'd see the footer, but then you would see that light blue on the side of the footer, okay? By choosing clear both, we tell the footer to always be at the bottom, always clear, right, whatever's above it, and always be fully across the bottom of the page. That's what we are using that for. Again, we don't really see it much now because the content on the right little column doesn't have enough to surpass the main content, right, that main area. So that's kind of what's happening there, just so you know why nothing's happening, okay? But it's always good just in case that does get filled with content, okay? All right, let's continue on. We did the footer. Ooh, now we're going to do number 3 with a bunch of bullets there, or a bunch of other 3, 4, and some bullets to start to really customize our page. So right now we do have a 2-column layout, okay? However, the 2-column isn't really that exciting because our navigation doesn't look very nice, and a few other elements we'd like to do. Like perhaps this graphic really should be floated, right? So it's not in line like, or a normal flow like we have, right? It slides over to one side or the other and let the text wrap around. That'll make this page a little bit more interesting, okay? So that's part of what we're going to do. Okay, after the footer, we're going to throw in an H2. So let's throw in an H2 element or selector. And it looks like we're just doing text color and font. So color will be, the same color, 86.9 DC7. Reminds me of a plane. And then we have the font family. So font dash family. And it's going to be Arial and sans serif. All right, so Arial sans dash serif. Woohoo. Save that, flip-flop, and now that changes our headings, right? Makes it a little bit nicer to look at. Color's different, right? The font's different. Makes it look nice, a lot better than before, I think. Or at least a little better than before. Okay, after our heading 2, we're going to add a style for a float. Yeah, we're going to float that graphic, I believe. So it's going to be an ID in this case. So float right. Oops. There we go. And float right is going to simply have 2 properties. The float, which is going to be right, and the margin. So we're going to give a margin to the object that this ID is being associated with. And it's going to be 10 pixels all around. Now, before we display it, because it's already been coded in, so let's look at our HTML and find the float right ID and where it is. Notice that it's in the image, right? So the image actually has that float right. So we're going to float right that graphic, okay? Just like we did in the example, all right, previously. All right, let's save that, flip-flop to your browser. Boom. The graphic slides over to the right. We get a nice little margin. Everything slides up. Again, now this makes it a little bit more interesting, right, the page. I like it a lot better. Okay. How's the pace? Are we doing okay? Say again? Oh, of course. Oh, okay. Sounds good. All right, let's continue on. After our float right, we're now on number 4 on page 233. We're going to add in, now our navigation coding. Nice. We're going to add in a descendant selector, nav UL. All right. So in the nav UL, we're going to change the list style type and the margin and the padding. None. All right, we don't want any bullets. That's gonna get rid of the bullets for us. The next thing is simply gonna kill the margin. So no margin. And then it looks like we have what, padding on there? Yeah, padding. And no padding. Now I'm gonna comment each of the margin out and the padding out so I can see them happen one at a time. All right, so I want to see what happens without the bullets. So no bullets now. Now I'm going to remove the comment from margin and see what that does. Notice we got rid of the margins. It kind of slides up because there was a margin at the top and on the left. Okay, or at least on the top for sure. And then we're going to get rid of the padding and see what happens to getting rid of the padding of the UL. Right? Look at that. Look at all that padding that was in there. Right? Boom. Now it's on the left-hand side. Right? Okay. All right, let's continue on. Now, let's do another descendant selector for the anchor. So, nav A. All right. And it looks like we're going to be adding text decoration, padding, display. Yeah, we're changing this to block level, right? Our block display, not inline display for our navigation. Okay. And then background color and border. Yep. Okay, so wow, we have a few things happening. So I'm going to write them all in, and then I might just add them one at a time just to see what happens. So let me put all these in there. And we have none, I believe, for text decoration. We have padding. That's going to be 20 pixels around the horn. We that's better. There we go. And we have, what's after that? We have background dash color. Man, not very good typing tonight. We have B3, C7, and E6. And then we have border. So border dash bottom. And so only affecting the bottom. Solid. Great. Now I'm going to comment out all of them except for one, right? The first one, just so I can see them kind of build. And that's always a good idea as well, so we know everything's working properly. So now I'm going to refresh. So now those lines should disappear. I like that. I'm going to add a little bit of padding to our anchors. There we go. I'm going to put in display block. Okay. Now, let me change this, and just for kicks, I'm going to change the width of that, right, nav area. Instead of 150, I'm just going to do it 300. I just want to see something. Yeah. Yeah, so it's just the... All right, so now we're going to do 50 back here. Just want to check that out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back down here to our block. All right, so really no difference there once we add this. Boom, right? That what displays as block. Okay, our anchors display as block. Then we have background color. So let's do that. Did I spell it wrong? Background color. Did I not save it? Yeah, maybe that's the color. And then we have a nice little line. So I guess to check, let me just make sure that it actually is working, right? So I'll take that out of there and I'll just do F00. Yeah, okay, so it is working. Great. Perfect. And so now we just put a bottom border, so that, again, makes this page look a little bit more interesting with that line. Bless you. With that line at the bottom of, right, the anchor, right? So we're really building up this anchor to make it look like navigation buttons, really, right? All right, let's continue on. All right, after the descendant selector, nav A, we're now going to throw in our pseudo classes. I'd like to see, right, what happens when I hover or change the link colors themselves right off the bat. So we need to still use our descendant selector because we don't want the other links to change throughout the page, only the ones inside the nav. So we're going to do nav anchor just like our descendant selector, but this time we're going to add a colon after the A, and then we're going to add in our pseudo class. And you'll notice that the color coding is a little bit different. This is what's going to help if you're using a code editor than a text editor, because text editors won't have this color coding, and that's what's going to be really nice. We can easily find errors by knowing what colors things should be. Okay. All right. We're going to change the color of the default link color. So instead of blue, we're going to make it white. So the default color, the color of the link without having been clicked on, right, is white. Great. Let's do another one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that and paste it and simply change what's necessary. So my next one is going to be the visited link. So I'm going to remove link and call it visited and then change the color. And the color here is going to be EA, EA, EA. So EA, EA, EA. All right. Now, it may be somewhat difficult to see, but it is a light gray. So what home used to be purple, for me at least, and now it's like this gray color. Right? And now the last one, right? This is it, our hover. So I'm going to go down and paste again and replace the word link with hover. So when we move the mouse over the link, it's going to turn this color, 86 9 DC7. Refresh, hover, and now your links are changing colors. Okay. Very cool. Again, this adds a little bit of interactivity. There's no JavaScript here. There's no scripting language happening back there. It's just CSS. Any questions? Can we move on? Okay. Please turn. We're going to skip a couple pages, and then we're going to come back. Turn to page 238, please. 238. Two, 3.8 and 2.3.9. Look at the CSS sprites. Yay! Right? Now we're going to use that sprite, that graphic. So before we do, I'd like to look at it first. So go back to your folder, find a file called sprites, and if you'd like to preview it somehow in a larger format, here it is. It's simply one file with two graphics in it. Because the background of this graphic is transparent, that's why it's gray there. But if we look at the actual file itself, notice that it actually looks white in the sample in a Windows environment, right? You see white background, not a gray background. So just FYI, right? And if I create a brand new browser page and then drag that graphic in it, we should see it white, right, as well, or gray. I guess it's that color of the background for our link. So it's a light gray, it appears. Right? Great. Okay. So we are going to use that graphic in our file. So let's go to our code. And we're going to be modifying the nav anchor, right? So the descendant selector, nav A, we're going to modify that one. That's the one we're going to modify. So first thing I want you to do is we're going to put in a background image. Okay? We're going to do one line at a time, so we can see how it builds. Now don't forget, there's no space between the URL and that open paren. So save that, flip-flop, refresh, right? Why is this happening? Why are we getting all this repetitive graphics? Because we haven't told it not to. By default, background is repeated. So let's do that. No repeat. So background graphic. Getting a little crazy. Repeat. And no repeat. Save that. Bingo. Yay. But we're not done, because the graphic is in the wrong location. So within the anchor, the graphic by default is set left align. We want it on the right-hand side. So let's add in another line. This line will be background position. If I can spell it right. Ground position. What the heck? Yikes. Okay. Background position. We're going to set it to the right. Okay. Fantastic. There we go. Flip-flop. Bingo. All right. I like that a lot. I like it a lot. All right. Let's see here. Okay, I like it. What do you think? So far, so good? Well, hold on, I gotta save this. I think I already did, didn't I? Hold on. Let me save this. Refresh. And so it's turning color, but we really want this thing to, right? Change the image. All right, yep. So we have to do one more thing, right? So we did add the graphic. That's great. But now we want to change the graphic, right? Its position when we hover. So go down to your nav, your descendant selector, nav A, and hover. So on the hover, we want to change the background position. Man, I'm terrible typing tonight. What's happening? Now, we still want it on the right-hand side, right? But instead of at the 0 positions, which is at the top of that element, we want to display, right, 100 pixels. We actually want to move the graphic up, okay? And so by moving the graphic up, we move it into negative space, okay? So if we think of our graphic, if we think of a crosshairs, okay, our graphic is always in the lower right quadrant of that crosshair. Okay? It's always in the lower right quadrant. When we move up, okay, we move into negative space. Okay? So, if I want to move this graphic up, so if my window, right, my little viewport that's going to display my little graphic, right, the piece of it, okay, and this is a longer graphic, so it's not horizontal. This one is vertical. Okay. So right now I'm displaying the first one. Okay. I want to display the second one. So I'm going to move into negative space, vertical negative space, okay, which moves the graphic up. Okay. This is vertical space, right? Going this way is also negative space. Okay? Moving forward, we now have positive. So positive numbers moves our graphic this way. Negative numbers moves it in the opposite direction if we're doing horizontal. Right? So what we need to do is we need to keep it to the right. So we're not changing that it's going to be on the right-hand side, but we are changing the position. So we're going to give it a negative 100 pixels. So the graphic moves up, right, into that negative space by 100 pixels to display the next graphic, which is 100 pixels below it, right? And now when we hover, we get the new graphic. Okay. This does take some time to get comfortable with, especially if you're doing, if you have a file that has a lot of elements in it, a lot of graphics in it, you really have to understand in what position your graphic is in. Okay. You can do both. You just add another value. Right? So we're using right, so we're applying it to the right. So get rid of right and give it a value. So, again, these can get really complex, but it's really cool because we could have one file with a lot of graphics in it. That makes our life a lot easier when we have to manage files. So let's think for a moment. Let's just start naming some of the graphics that might be repeated on a page, which I think we already did, but let's count them out. What's one of them? Buttons, navigation buttons. Probably more than one, right? So let's just say 4 navigational graphical buttons. Okay, so we got 4 right there. Logo, right? 5. What else? How many social media icons do you typically want on your page? At least 2, right? Yeah, LinkedIn or Facebook, Twitter, and a lot of other ones too, right? So let's just say 3 there, right? So now we're on 8 files. What else? The copyright symbol or the... Oh, that's an actual special character. Yeah, it's not a graphic. All right, let's just... Well, background is a full graphic itself. So you may, right, you could, if you had a sliver, right, if it was a sliver of a graphic, if it's going to be repetitive, right, you could have that on there. Okay, so now let's say we're at about 10. That's 10 separate files you have to manage. Imagine now only managing one file. All those are in that one file. You simply need to manage. So if we get a new logo for our client, we get new social media icons, we simply replace them, right? They're in the same spot, we just replace them. Hopefully they're the same size, we're going to have to make some adjustments there, but yeah, a much easier way to manage these repetitive graphical elements throughout our website. So, okay. Now, we would not, let me repeat, we would not include graphics that are within the content area, right? We wouldn't include that graphic of that lighthouse because it's part of the content, right? We wouldn't include that. We wouldn't include graphics that are part of a gallery. Doesn't make sense, right? It's not repetitive. This is not repetitive. It happens once on one page and that's it. So we don't put it in that image sprite. Okay. Great. All right, let's continue on. So let's turn back to page 236. 236? Let's see. Did we already do? Oh, no, yeah. 236. Now let's do our gallery. Okay. Now our gallery at the end will look something like this. Right? But we're going to take that gallery, not going to put it on a separate page. We're going to stick it inside of this one. Okay? Now you probably noticed when you went to the HTML that towards the bottom of that page you had some commented out code. It's in green, right? I comment that out. That's the image gallery that we're going to include. Okay, so I just kind of started a little bit of code there for us so we know where it goes. Okay. All right, this happens on page 236 and 237. Okay. All right. Let's see here. So right now, what we've done is I've created an H2 element, so it kind of mimics the other H2s, right? And this is image gallery, it's called. That's what I put in the H2. I then created a div, and I gave it an ID of gallery, which we're going to style. So the whole gallery is going to be inside of a container, right? Meant specifically for a gallery, okay? And this gallery is going to be made up of an unordered list. That's right. An unordered list will be a gallery, which is fantastic, right? So using CSS, we're going to manipulate this bullet list into a gallery, okay? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove my comments. So I don't need the comment anymore, the opening and closing. So now I'm left with my green or blue code, right? So I'm going to save that, flip-flop to my browser, refresh. Refresh that. Should see my H2 at least. I'm not sure where it is, but it should be there, and I'm not sure why I don't see it. H2 gallery, it's saved. Do I have a different file open? Yours, yeah. Okay, that's good. Yours worked. I appreciate it. That's good to know. I'm not sure why mine's not though. So yeah. Let's see. Image gallery H2. I don't see anything out of the ordinary here. Let's try to save that and refresh again. Let's do a hard refresh. No, it's not there. Am I looking at the wrong file? Maybe. Hold on. Maybe that was it. Oh, yeah, that's it. Sorry. Whew. I'm wondering. I'm like, wait a minute. I don't see anything wrong there. Like, it's going to drive me crazy now. All right, good. Yeah, I was looking at the wrong file. Fantastic. Thank you. All right, so we have our H2 and we have our bullet, right? There's one bullet there in that UL. So now let's go ahead and start adding some stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build the actual content, right? We're not going to style anything yet. We're going to build those graphics that we want as our gallery. So inside of the LI, this is where all of the content is going to go for each of the graphics. Under number 3 on page 236, you're going to see one LI code, okay? All I want to do is code each element on its own, and let's just talk about it a little bit, okay? So the first element I want you to add in there is the anchor. Okay, so the anchor, and we got a closing anchor tag, right? So that's the first thing. And then we're going to code that out. So we'll do href, and it will contain a file called photo1, I believe, right? .jpg. Okay, good. And at this point, that's really all, and I'm going to expand this so it's a little bit easier to see. There we go. Photo 0. There we go. So right now, our anchor, our link, our list item, our bullet is going to be a link that we'll be able to click on, okay, to view this photo called Photo 1, okay? So let's save that, flip-flop over, refresh. Oh, and there's nothing inside of that anchor, so that's why we're not getting no link. So as soon as we put something in there, we'll see something. Now, I want to display a graphic within the bullet, right? So inside of the anchor, we're going to add an image element. And then it will display and become a link for us. So in the image element itself, we're going to add a source, right? Because I do want to display a graphic, and I have to tell it where that graphic is and what the name of it is. So it's called photo thumb.jpg. It does have a width, right? We do want to apply a width to it, so we can define it. And that width is going to be 100 pixels. It is also going to be set to a height of 75 pixels, and we can confirm what the graphic size is as opposed to what we want it to display as, right? So we can display it as whatever size we want. What it actually is might be something else, and we'll check that out in a minute. And then the alternative, right, text that we want here looks like Golden Gate Bridge. So it looks like that's probably the graphic. Golden Gate and Bridge. Right. Okay. Now, what else do we need to add that's not in the book here to a graphic? What other attribute? What other attributes should we add? Thank you. Let's add the title. Title. There we go. And I'm simply going to use at this point the same because I believe the alt is well enough defined, right, described for me to use it as my title. Sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes the alt is just one word. Maybe that's not enough. We need to express it a little bit more, right? But this is okay. All right, so now we have a graphic that should be a link, right? And so the question is, well, my graphic is not showing up, so I have to figure out why. And I believe I forgot to add maybe a number at the end of it. Yeah, or in between. All I did was photo thumb. I need photo 1 thumb. There we go. So now my graphic is there. So supposedly this is a thumbnail version of the larger graphic. Hover your mouse over the graphic and click it. Does it take you to the graphic? Yes, because it's a link. That's why, right? That's why we go to the graphic. So we have a bullet that essentially is a link to a graphic. Now, I want to just check out what the graphic looks like in my Windows Explorer. Photo thumb, here it is. I'm going to preview it. Yeah, and that's how small it is. Right? Now, the file that it's going to display, right, is called photo1. So that's the file that we're going to get when we hover over it. Now, it may not be this size when we display it, but that's the graphic we want to use as we move forward. Okay? All right. So now let's go back to our code. And after the image, but still inside the anchor, we're going to use a span. So I'm going to give myself a new line within the anchor there, and I'm going to code a span. Now remember, spans do not create a line break. That's the purpose of the span. It allows us to style in line, right, or create content in line. So inside of the span is going to be that full-sized graphic that we want. So we're going to add another image element. And to make life a lot easier for us, I'm going to copy all of the information within the first image element, and I'm going to paste it inside the second image element. And then I'm going to adjust, of course. So my source is no longer photo 1 thumb, it's simply photo 1. The width is no longer 100, it's 250. That's the size that I want to see. And then the height is going to be 150, no longer 75. The alt and the title, no problem, we can use it. There we go. Is the same. Okay. Now, after, and we can save that and refresh, notice that the graphic appears next to it, as it should, because we did not provide a break. Okay? So we have a small version and a large version and a link all inside a bullet, but we're not done yet. Now, I do want some text. I want a little caption. So after the span, I want you to give me a break element. And then give me a new line, and we're going to add some text. That text is going to be the same content as your title. So copy what's in your title, or alt, and put it after the break. Oh, I'm sorry, I put it in the wrong spot. Yes, you're right. It should be in the span. It should be. Yep. And so we're going to put the break in the span as well. There. So I'll give it a new line there. So after the image, after the image, put a break, right? And then the text, and then the span. So it's inside the span. Right? So everything should be inside the span. Because what we're really going to do is that little caption should display with the larger image when we do our CSS. It shouldn't just display on its own, right? So it only should display when that larger image displays. So let's save that, and let's see what we got. So right now, this is our one graphic as our gallery. Okay, we still have to add a lot of CSS to get this thing to work. Not a lot. Actually, some CSS, not a lot. Okay? But what we have is a thumbnail, we have the larger graphic, and we have a caption for that graphic. Please copy that LI, and I want you to repeat it. How many more times? 3 more times. So give me a new line after the closing LI, paste it. Right? And then do the same thing after that one, and again. So we should have 4 total LIs. And so now if I maybe do a little bit of handiwork to tab in, it might be a little bit easier, right, to see what we have here. So we have an anchor, right? We have a graphic. If I tab that, right? Then inside of that we have a span. I'll tab that in. And now inside of the span we have another graphic, right? And then we have some text there in that span. And let me go ahead and close out this span here. There we go. So now this gives us an idea of the hierarchy, right, of that anchor within the first LI. So LI, an anchor, an image, then a span, and inside the span we have another image and some text. Great. Now, we have 4 different graphics. We have a graphic called Photo 2, Photo 3, and Photo 4. So please adjust the photo numbers so that all 4 graphics display. So change the 1s to a 2, then change them to a 3, then change them to a 4. You'll have to do it in 3 different spots for each of the bullets. Each bullet should have their own number. So now I should have 4 different bullets, right? 4 graphics. And then we'll turn this into a gallery. All right, I'm going to kind of format this because I think it'll be much better to see it a little bit better formatted, right? It'll make our brains perhaps work a little bit easier to comprehend all the stuff that's happening here. Oops. Now, you might be asking yourself, how the heck would I have figured this out, right, on my own? Well, a lot of practice, or you wouldn't have, until somebody decided to figure it out for you and then shared it on the web and said, yeah, this is how you do this, right? So for them, it was a matter of trial and error as well, right? Understanding properties, right? Gives them that ability to play around a little bit and see if they can get something to work. Okay, good. So now we have some really nice structured code here. It makes my life a little bit easier so I can really understand what is made up, right, of this list, this 4 bullets, each of them made up with the same code, just different graphics. Okay? Now, let's start to stylize this. Okay? All right, we're going to create a embedded. Oh, no, we're not. We already have a lighthouse. I'm sorry. Let's go to our lighthouse CSS. Forgot about this external CSS we had. At the bottom of your CSS, the first thing we're going to style, and it's on page 237 under number 5, is the gallery. So go ahead and create a ID gallery. And we're going to set the position to relative. All right? So it's relatively positioned within the object that it's already in, the element that it's in, which is main. Okay. Relative. There we go. Okay. That really shouldn't change much, right, at this point here. So that just sets a nice little baseline for us, that's all. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a descendant selector just for the ULs inside the gallery. So only the ULs will be styled this way. Change the width and change the list style. So width, changing the width to 250. Ooh, that looks familiar. That sounds familiar to me. 250. There's a reason why that's 250. And then list dash style dash type. And what do we got here? None, right? Okay. So now we've removed the bullet, right? Which essentially now everything starts to line up for us, which is great. Okay. Oh, and we've made it only 250 pixels wide. So the UL itself, right? So if we go back to our file, this UL right here is only 250 pixels wide. Okay? That's why everything's slid down, because we only have 250 pixels, which, by the way, is the size of that other photo, right? So the larger photo is 250 pixels wide as well. So what I think is going to happen is that we're going to have a 250 pixel space and another 250 pixel space, right? That's going to look something like this. And whenever we hover over, it's going to display a 250 width graphic on the right-hand side. So we're just making space for all of our thumbnails. That's really what we're doing here at this point. Okay. All right. Underneath the descendant selector gallery UL, okay, we're going to add another descendant selector for the LI this time. So gallery LI. So we're going to affect just the LIs. And we're going to change the display to inline. Remember, LIs are block level by default. Then we're going to add a float. So it floats the LIs to the left. And then we're going to give it some padding. So display inline. Then we're going to float it to the left. And then we're going to give it some padding. We're going to give it 10 pixels of padding all around. Okay. Again, not much change here. We're just setting things up so we can continue on. You saw a little bit of change with that padding. But the display inline and the display or float left didn't really do much because it was already on the left-hand side, right? And the inline didn't really change much in this case, but it is important to have, okay, for what we're doing later on. All right, after the gallery LI, we are now going to modify the image. So inside the gallery. So again, we need a descendant selector. And we're going to be adding in just a border style. So nothing too exciting here. Just a border style. Border style. Border, oops. Sorry. Not sure why I hit an A there. Border style. And what kind of style? Oh, we're going to get rid of the style. Okay, we're going to get rid of the style. Done. Okay. Okay. Now, let me do this real quick here. Just want to see if IE still does that. IE used to put a so when you had a graphic that was a link in previous versions of IE, you'd actually get a box around the graphic, a blue box, because it's a link, right? And so finally they've updated that, but you never know. They may be using an older version browser, right? So we still want to capture that and say, get rid of the border. We don't want one, just in case, right? So that's kind of what we're doing with that line. Okay. So I'll put that back. Fantastic. Oops. Ay, ay, ay. Not good typing tonight for some reason. Not sure why. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to affect the anchor within the gallery, right? So any links, gallery, within any anchors within the gallery, we're going to affect, and we are going to change, get rid of the underline. We're going to give it some color, and we're going to change the font style. So we want text dash decoration, none. We want color for the text color. That will be some sort of gray, I believe. And then we want font dash style. And we're going to have italic as the style. Okay. So we got rid of the underline, we gave it a color, and we gave it italic. It definitely looks better now. Okay. So we're getting there. Piece by piece, we're putting this thing together. Okay. All right, the next thing we're going to add is the span. So before we start editing more and doing some more CSS, let's go back to our HTML and just see kind of what we've done so far. We've made modifications to the UL, well, to the gallery. Made modifications to the UL, the LI, the anchor, the image, right? What else did we do? The anchor and the image. Now we're going to look at modifying the span, this object right here, this element. Okay, so little by little we start to affect each one of those. Okay, so any span, right, inside the gallery we want to affect. Here we're going to do display none. Ho ho ho. Display none simply says hide this element. That means it's going to hide the full size graphic. That's cool. Boom. Yes. Right? So we got rid of the full size graphics, which means those thumbnails, right, essentially wrap up into that 250 pixel wide space that we have. Right? And if I do outline block level, right, there we have it. So we have our gallery, which is the blue line, and then we have our UL, which is the green box, right? And our elements within, our thumbnails within. Okay. So when we have to go back to our CSS, our gallery LI, and we told it to display in line, that's what we were doing. Right? So those little thumbnails would be right next to each other. And the more thumbnails you have, the more they will wrap. Right? Only within this 250 pixel space that we have. This green box right here. Okay? Now, what we have next is to display the larger size graphic, so to turn on the display when we hover over the appropriate graphic, and then put it in a certain spot. Okay. How many of you have gone to websites where you've clicked something and it expanded? Clicked on it again, and right. So do you see how the CSS is working? Display on, display off, right? So as we get to do things, it's starting to hover, click, and right on click, display. On click, don't display, right? Turn it off, turn it on. So yeah, a lot of really cool stuff. Without any JavaScript or any scripting language, we can do a lot of stuff with CSS, which is very, very exciting. All right, let's move on to our CSS. Our next challenge is to now make some changes to the, and let me go back to the code, to this information, right? Our graphic. So right now the span is not displayed. It's hidden from us. That larger graphic is now hidden from us. What I want to do is that when I hover over the thumbnail, I want the span to display. Right? So to do that, we're going to do something very interesting. Not only do we have a descendant selector, but we also have a pseudo class within that. We have a multi-level descendant selector. Very cool. All right, so let's go back. So anything inside the gallery, okay, any anchor, okay, in the gallery. However, when it gets hovered over, right, only when the anchor gets hovered, but make sure that it's the span that's inside the anchor, that's inside the gallery. So look at that multi-level descendant selector. Any span that's inside the anchor can only get affected on the hover if it's inside the gallery. Yeah. We are really specifically identifying what we want. Right? That's what's really good about pseudo classes as well as descendant selectors. We can be very specific. Okay? Specificity is the important thing here. Alrighty. Now let's create those rules or those declarations. We are now going to reverse what we did before. We're going to do a display block. So it's going to display it again as a block. So we went from display none to back to what its original display is. The next thing we're going to add is we're going to set the position. Okay. So the position of this element, right, of this object, the span, is going to be absolute. If I can spell it right. Absolute. There we go. And it should be absolutely positioned 10 pixels from the top of that element, okay, of the container that it's in, and 300 pixels from the left. Oops. Left 300 pixels. Remember, our element is right here. So we have 150 pixels already, right? So we need to get by. So we're going to, from here, we need to go 300 pixels from the left, then display the graphic. Okay? So we have to bypass all of that stuff that's already there to display the new one. Okay? All right. So after that, we're going to center it. So we're going to center the text, that the little caption that we have. So text dash align center. Okay. So we display it as block. We display it again. We set it as absolute, and every time, regardless, right? Let's put that graphic 10 pixels from the top of that object, from the container, and 300 pixels from the left of the container that it's in. So save that, refresh, okay? And now we have that gallery. Now, it seems to fall in a precarious spot right there, right? So we may have to do a little bit of work with the, maybe adding some padding or perhaps a break. I don't really like breaks, but perhaps a margin or padding between maybe the image gallery and the gallery itself, or the image gallery and the content above that. Right? But the point is that we have now a nice little gallery, right? And it's displaying 300 pixels from the left and 10 pixels from the top of that element, right? Of the containing element. What do you think? You think you might use this technique in your project or something, or in future websites? Okay, that's cool. We covered a lot of stuff tonight. We did a lot of coding. Okay. An hour and 50 minutes worth almost. So we did a lot of really cool stuff. Okay. I'm hoping that what we did, that we showed you a file that had the content, then you go and style it, makes sense, right? Because it's much, much more difficult to style every piece as you code it in your HTML. Do all of the HTML first as much as possible, then style each of those pieces as you go. Okay? So you don't code, style, you code, and then style, 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 style. All right, that's all I have for you tonight for the hands-on. We stopped at page 237. We kind of flipped around a little bit, but we basically covered everything that's in this chapter, which is really good in one way, shape, or another.